From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell. This is The Log. Hey, listen to this. This made me smile today. You know that I'm morally opposed to paywalls. With a couple of rare exceptions, I don't participate, and I don't allow myself to get nickeled and dimed, especially when it comes to all these streaming services. I'll find my music and my movies and my television viewing entertainment without having to pony up. I think it's undemocratic. I think it's just a bad way for the system to operate. I think that someday, in the not too distant future, we'll look back at these days and see it for what it is, kind of this transition period when late stage capitalists were trying to figure out how to continue to profit from their digital content in a world where the technology has allowed for all of us to share freely. And they just can't handle it. So we're in this weird transition phase now where there are too many to count. All these different streaming services, all these different paywalls. All information, news, politics, entertainment, all of it should be free because it's all digital. And we all have equal access, at least we all should. The only thing keeping us from having equal access is the insistence that profit be maintained at all cost. So after this transition, at some point, a new model will arise. And I'm hoping it's one without profit, without money, where we all share equally with each other. Or it could be some awful dystopian profit-centered system. I don't know what the future holds, but it's not going to be this. It's not going to be this Wild West of infinite paywalls. It's just too unwieldy. But for me, it comes down to I'm taking a moral stand. It's just not right. It's not democratic. It's not fair. Well, here's the story that got my attention. Giannis Antetokounmpo, everybody's favorite NBA star, the face of the league, reading from uprocks.com right now. Headline, Giannis won't watch USA basketball against Iran because he doesn't want to pay for Peacock. I love this. It's a short article. I'll just read it to you. Let's see. It's Bill DiFilippo, associate editor, Uprocks. Giannis Antetokounmpo is flying high after winning the NBA Finals with the Milwaukee Bucks and being named the NBA Finals MVP. But unfortunately for Antetokounmpo, something popped up on Tuesday that reminded him of the fickleness of capitalism, even if you are a champion. Having to get a streaming service to watch something. Antetokounmpo wanted to know how he'd get to watch Team USA take on Iran at the Tokyo Olympics, sending out a tweet and looking for some guidance. He tweeted, "What time is the USA team playing tonight and which channel? Thanks." Unfortunately for Antetokounmpo, Eric Nem of The Athletic let him know that the game is airing on Peacock, which means he has to fork over some cash to get the streaming service. And here's Nem's tweet. "Oh man, knowing how you feel about subscription to The Athletic, you're not going to like this answer." Antetokounmpo quickly decided that if he has to fork over some cash, there is no way he's going to tune into the game. Giannis tweets, "If I gotta pay, never mind." On one hand, Antetokounmpo has a lot of money, so he can probably swing this. On the other, opting to not pay for streaming services, which just make it harder to watch TV by hiding everything we like behind a paywall instead of just putting it on cable, is an admirable moral stance. All right. My buddy, Giannis and I are simpatico on this. Yep. Taking a moral stance against streaming services and paywalls of all kind. There you go. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed reading that. Something else come up in my social feed just yesterday, I saw a few of these. People are angry. There is something in the air. I mean, of course, you're always going to see angry posts. That's nothing new. But there was just, I don't know, I kind of took note. There's a special tone. There's something in the air. People are not having it. And I just want to share a couple with you just as examples. My friend Jason posted this. I'm just going to read it exactly as he wrote it. If you're not vaccinated, you're the reason. The reason mask mandates are going back into effect. The reason live music is getting killed. The reason this winter will be miserable. The reason another holiday season will be without family. Heartless, worthless, awful, selfish shitheads. I hope the worst for you. That is a nice little pithy rant right there. And I couldn't agree more. You know, we try to get at the subtleties of these big stories. We try, and we have all these debates. I know with my friends and cohorts, how can we reach these people? And there are all sorts of different ideas. You know, do we threaten? Do we cajole? Do we plead? By the way, side note, I use that expression because it's a lyric that stuck with me from, as a song from the musical Camelot. It's called How to Handle a Woman. Now, I know it sounds sexist, but it's not. It's really more sweet than anything else. It goes, how to handle a woman. There's a way, said the wise old man. A way known by every woman since the whole rigmarole began. Do I flatter her? I begged him answer. Do I threaten or cajole or plead? Do I smile and play the gay romancer? Said he smiling, no indeed. How to handle a woman? Mark me well, I will tell you, sir. The way to handle a woman is to love her, simply love her, merely love her, love her, love her. I just love that song. And yeah, the title sounds sexist, but I think it's sweet. It's how to handle everybody. But in this case, he's worried about his romantic life. So yeah, how do you handle people? Do you threaten? Do you cajole? Do you plead? Do you just love them? How do we deal with anti-vaxxers? And it is entirely their fault that we're going through this. There's no nuance there. It's just your fault, man. That's all there is to it. So thanks, Jason, for that. Heartless, worthless, awful, selfish heads. I hope the worst for you. Man. And then the other one was from my friend Chad, who wrote this on another topic, but just as angry and in a tone that I'm not used to seeing from this particular friend. He writes, the 65% of Republicans who think January 6 shouldn't be further investigated can go ahead and unfriend me. I'm disgusted by the vast majority of elected Republicans and the bloviators on Fox, Newsmax, and One American News. Un-American scumbags. Yeah, that's not the kind of language I normally use. It's not the kind of language my friend Chad normally uses, but there's something in the air. There's something going on. All right, so vent if you need to. I'm not gonna criticize either of those two social media friends of mine. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. I had a similar post at some point after January 6th. I forget when I posted it. And I did. It's the only time I ever did that. I said, please just unfriend me. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Some people who are making jokes about January 6th or defending it or denying it. Yeah. Which, well, I guess this kind of brings me to the main topic at hand, at least the one on my mind. You know, I use the word fascism often, and I don't use it lightly. I don't toss it around carelessly. American fascism is real, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. And there's no way we can just ignore it or turn our backs on it. If we do, we're screwed. If we allow it to grow, if we allow it to fester, it's like that mole on the back of your neck. It's getting bigger. I'd rather not think about it. I'm just not going to think about it. I won't look at it. No, that's not what you want to do. That's a bad mistake. That's where we are. And the words roll easily off my tongue. You've heard me say it so many times. The Republican Party, the fascist, white supremacist, anti-democratic, illegitimate party, needs to be destroyed. They need to not exist. It's an illegitimate, dangerous party. Noam Chomsky has called them the most dangerous entity on the planet, and I wholeheartedly agree. And that's why I just fight and I fight against centrism and so-called bipartisanship. It's not a legitimate party. A piece yesterday from truthout.org, headline, "The right wing wants misinformation and manufactured ignorance, not democracy." Henry A. Garreau, writer. Manufactured ignorance now thrives in a world of interlacing disasters. This age of consuming catastrophes is part and parcel of an age of survival of the fittest economics, fueled by the rise of right-wing authoritarianism and political extremists. The rule of markets and its legitimating notion of economic Darwinism represents a return to the massive inequalities and culture of cruelty that marked the Gilded Age. This was an era when entrepreneurial pieties were used to legitimize unfettered markets and the concentration of power in the hands of a financial elite. In its updated version, the new Gilded Age of neoliberal capitalism continues with a vengeance to reward the ultra-rich and powerful while beating workers, immigrants, and poor black and brown people into the ground. The rising tide of fascist politics has been matched by new anti-democratic practices and modes of oppression and expression. From his primetime perch as a television host on Fox News, Tucker Carlson has become the most influential propagandist and most visible voice for white grievance ideology and replacement theory. He has also risen to the top of the mainstream media ecosystem with his politics of white nationalism, his relentless blasting of liberals and leftists, and his support for Donald Trump's unfounded claim that the election was rigged and stolen. And he continues in that vein regarding culture, media, and especially the right-wing movement led by the former president. Let me skip ahead here. The U.S.'s slide into a fascist politics demands a revitalized understanding of the historical movement in which we find ourselves. Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm trying to convey when I use these harsh words. I'm not just being hyperbolic. I'm not being hyper-partisan. I'm trying to call out what I see and warn of the dangers. And as amazing as it may sound, I think some people just really aren't understanding the gravity of this. And the idea that we can just sort of love our way out of it or ignore our way out of it or status quo our way out of it is just so dangerously inadequate. Well, let me just read the bottom line here of this essay. Increasingly, an image-based culture is where people realize themselves as citizens, as agents, and as members of a larger community. Agency is the basis of politics, and culture is the sphere where people become either politically literate or civically illiterate. Matters of subjectivity, persuasion, and identification are the material bedrock of politics and are no less important than the economic structures through which they work to normalize the plague of depoliticization, infantilization, and their endpoint, fascist politics. To forget this is to give the far right and gangster capitalism an upper hand in the culture war that might be impossible to reverse. The stakes are much too high for all this to happen. That's Henry Garreau of McMaster University. Yeah. When I call them fascists, when I call them white supremacists, when I call them anti-democratic, when I call them dangerous, I mean it. is real. And it's at every level. Fascism is at every level. Just this week, Representative Janelle Brandtjen, a state rep from Wisconsin, has claimed that Donald won the presidency in 2020, and massive fraud caused the election to be stolen from him, something she wrote in a newsletter to her constituents just this week. And Brandtjen is calling for a so-called forensic investigation like they did in Arizona. Now, thankfully, the Wisconsin Elections Commission is not having it. Their response: it is unfortunate that Representative Brandtjen is claiming there are ghost voters in Wisconsin when nothing could be further from the truth. She should stop spreading these wild conspiracy theories. So, let's be grateful for the few walls that are put up, but the Wisconsin Elections Commission is a pretty thin wall. We can't rely on them and other state commissions around the country because they themselves are being attacked. One of the underreported aspects of all the voter suppression laws passed so far and others being considered, you can't give voters water and snacks, and they're reducing drop-off boxes and voter hours. Yeah, those are all bad. But the most frightening thing of all in these laws is that they're taking power away from these independent commissions. These states are changing the way votes are counted. They're handing over power of elections to partisan legislators who can just literally toss out the votes they don't like. It's a structural change. So our line of defense against the modern fascists is being weakened as we speak. And back to my original point, this fascism, you can't just point at the former president, the Orange Menace. It's happening at every level. Look at your own local elections for school board, for God's sakes, in a small town. You're going to find this kind of rhetoric. It's seeped down and infiltrated every level of government where somebody has an R in front of their name. And that's why I'm going to continue to beat the drum and tell you this is an illegitimate party. I don't care if he's the nicest guy in the world, he's your neighbor, and he pets your dog when he goes out for his little jog in the morning. If he's got an R in front of his name, he is an accomplice. He is complicit. Fascism is on the rise. We all watched the Capitol Police officers' testimony in Congress. These are non-political people, they're non-partisan, but they just exposed all of the lies. Reading from the Washington Post, Republicans have continued their whitewash of what happened that day, and their refusal to acknowledge the moral rot of the self-proclaimed patriots who attacked the Capitol. Those rioters were there at the instigation of President Donald Trump, who had convinced them that violence was a means by which they could overturn the result of a fairly decided presidential election. Even now, polls indicate that a quarter of Republicans approve of the rioters' actions. The Orange Menace called the mob a loving crowd. It was Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia who compared the scene of the insurrectionists breaching the building with a normal tourist visit. This is why I use the word fascist. When you can look into a camera and lie like that, when you can intentionally spread misinformation and disinformation, when you can support an anti-democratic coup, I don't use the word fascist lightly. You may have seen lists like this. I'm going to read one to you. And it's not just some blogger. This is taken from a poster on display at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Early warning signs of fascism. Powerful and continuing nationalism, check. Disdain for human rights, check. Identification of enemies as a unifying cause, check. Supremacy of the military, check. Rampant sexism, yes. Controlled mass media, yes, they want to. Obsession with national security, yes. Religion and government intertwined. Corporate power protected. Labor power suppressed. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Obsession with crime and punishment. Rampant cronyism and corruption. Fraudulent elections. Check, 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 right on down the list. Tell me where I'm wrong. Now, people are very quick to point out, moderates and those who don't want to go too far, well, you can't make these Nazi fascist comparisons. It's not like they're out killing 6 million people. How far are we removed? I mean, seriously, how far are we from that? This blatant disregard for life with 600,000 dead from COVID, and they just allowed it to happen. To this day, they don't care. Using the military, General Milley, we recently learned, had to talk the Orange Menace down from attacking Iran because he wanted to have a war with Iran in the middle of election time and Black Lives Matter and all that. He thought, well, it'd be good for him politically to attack Iran. Luckily, the people around him didn't let him do it. But how close did we come? He did use the military against American citizens. We all know that. They're speaking of bills around the country and laws, they're criminalizing protests. That's one of the favorite little things on state legislature agendas, to criminalize protests. They demonize opponents. They vilify everybody who's not on their side, which, by the way, I'm not doing. I'm going to be very clear about that. I'm not defining my opposition, the Republican, fascist, white supremacist, illegitimate party. I'm not attacking them based on something I've invented. They come right out and show us every day. There's no straw man going on here. I'm not creating a straw man argument. I'm not inventing my enemy. I'm looking right at them. I'm listening to their own words. I'm seeing their own actions. When a violent mob attacks the U.S. Capitol and kills people, I don't have to invent anything. Scapegoating immigrants and people of color. Again, vilify, demonize. Open white supremacy. Unparalleled, at least in our time, propaganda, lies, misinformation, attacking the very concept of truth itself. What is more definitional of fascism than that? And this is a good time to remind you, yes, the Orange Menace is indeed a menace, and he's still out there, and he's still leading this illegitimate fascist white supremacist party, yes. But it's also important to remind you that it didn't start with him, especially on the whole propaganda attack of truth thing. Remember reality-based community? Remember that little quote? That was journalist Ron Suskind quoting an unnamed official in the George W. Bush administration in New York Times Magazine. Reading now. The aide said that guys like me, referring now to himself, journalist Ron Suskind, were in what we call the reality-based community, which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of disseminable reality. That's not the way the world really works anymore, he continued. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do. That's from 2004. That's almost 20 years ago. That's the George W. Bush administration, when a lot of us were crying about, wait a minute, you guys, warning, warning, fascism. Reality-based community. Now, if that's not frightening dystopian talk, I don't know what is. And then in an echo of history, jump to 2017. Now it's Kellyanne Conway talking to Chuck Todd on the program Meet the Press. Reading from Wikipedia now. She defended White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's false statement about the attendance numbers of Donald Trump's inauguration as President of the United States. When pressed during the interview with Chuck Todd to explain why Spicer would utter a provable falsehood, Conway stated that Spicer was giving alternative facts. Todd responded, "Look, alternative facts are not facts, they're falsehoods." Conway's use of the phrase alternative facts for demonstrable falsehoods was widely mocked on social media and sharply criticized by journalists and media organizations. Conway later defended her choice of words, defining alternative facts as additional facts and alternative information. So I know we're not supposed to make comparisons to Goebbels and the Nazis. We're not supposed to make comparisons to Mussolini and fascists. And yes, you can always nitpick about specific definitions. You can parse words. You can play the language game. You can play the rhetoric game all you want. And you can go into the details of different historical moments. But when you just look at this plainly and call it what it is, the current Republican Party in this country is illegitimate. They're fascist. They're white supremacist. They're white nationalist. And when I throw these words around, I'm not just being a partisan. And anybody who tries to both sides this thing is complicit. You're an appeaser. Anybody who thinks we can work with them, anybody who continues to advocate for so-called bipartisanship, what's it going to take? We've been warning you since Ronald Reagan. And it really hit the fan with George W. Bush. And now we're going over this cliff with the Orange Menace and his continued power over a sizable faction of American politics that absolutely must be vanquished. I don't care if they're running for town council of some little hamlet somewhere, or school board, or state legislature. I don't care what level. From dog catcher up to the White House, if you got an R in front of your name, you are complicit. You are guilty by association. You are an accessory to fascism. And it is incumbent upon all of us, each and every single one of us, to call it out and to fight it with whatever tools are at our disposal. All right. Well, that mole on the back of your neck, go get that checked out, okay? I love you. I'm Charles Purcell. This episode of The Log is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Or best yet, go to the website, charlespurcell.com. There you're going to find all the links to all the shows, plus a lot more. You can follow and contact me on Facebook and Twitter. And while you're on social media, remember to leave a comment, and most importantly, hit that share button. When you share the podcast, well, that's really how we get out there to everybody. Thanks. A big thank you to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. Thanks for listening.